Ever Fonky Lowdown. It's the Ever Fonky Lowdown. It's the Ever Fonky Lowdown. It's the funky, funky get down. Oh, can you see? Oh, can you see? It's the Ever Fonky Lowdown. It's the lowdown, funky lowdown. Oh, can you see? You and me. The Ever Fonky Lowdown. What can you see? Ever Fonky Lowdown. 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 Ever Fonky Lowdown.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thane Rosenbaum. I'm the creative director of the Forum on Life, Culture, and Society at Touro College, and welcome to the Folks Conversation series. You have just been listening to the Ever Fonky Lowdown in 4, which is the title track to the latest musical composition by the incomparable Wynton Marsalis, who is also the artistic and managing director of jazz at Lincoln Center. If he's going to be with us in a moment, if you're watching us on Facebook, welcome. Wonderful having you here. We know we also have a lot of jazz students around the country. Wynton, it's a true national audience for you. If you're watching on Facebook, just to make sure that you see our future programming, please go to folks.org, folcs.org, and put your email address in, and then we'll reach you for future events. If you have a question for Wynton, you can go to the Q&A button somewhere on the bottom of your screen or to the right. And leave a message, leave a question. Hopefully we'll get a chance to ask it of Wynton. So Wynton, welcome, thank you. This is really an incredible achievement, this record. I have to say, I think it's more than just a musical composition. It doesn't describe it. Some of us are familiar, or many of us are familiar with, among your many other records, Blood on the Field, which won Fields, which won, I think, the 1996 Pulitzer Prize. I think it was the first jazz record ever to win the Pulitzer Prize. And like this, it was ambitious. It also had a libretto. There was a narrative through line, so it was just music and words that you wrote. But this, I don't know, it's the funkiness has a kind of jazz operatic feel to it. All that New Orleans, Gershwin-esque stuff for me. I hear, you know, a postmodern Porgy and Bess. Obviously, not unsurprisingly, we have interesting commentary on racial issues in the world and human rights issues. It's an ambitious composition, Wynton, but it's one that only you could write. So thank you, congratulations. First, Wynton, what does the Ever Fonky Lowdown mean?
Well, it has double meaning. First, it's ever means it's always this way. Funky means it's something that has is a groove, like the style of music we played in the 1970s. But it also means something does not smell right. It's funky. And low down means, man, that's low down. That's like you did something that was dirty, low down, and it was sneaky, and it was you shouldn't have done it. And it also, the low down also means I'm going to tell you what's really happening. So it uses all of those words to convey the double meaning. And it's also satire. The piece is satirical.
Right. Well, it's definitely that. I mean, there is a through line with a character, Mr. Game. It's not just the music that you're hearing that Wynton wrote. You're also hearing a kind of ironic, cynical voice of a man who's providing sort of object lessons about the world in which we live. He's riffing. His name is Mr. Game. He's a street prophet, an urban philosopher, a hustler, a con man, a confidence man, the soothsayer. And his name is well appropriate because he's also talking about life as a game. His name is Mr. Game. And really, he's describing all of us being in this game. So he's almost like a game show host.
Right.
And the voice is supplied, the words are supplied by Wynton Marsalis. The voice is supplied by the actor Wendell Pierce. And let's hear some of Mr. Game, and then we'll get into the music and the libretto. This is Mr. Game. The piece is They Too Want to Be Winners. Servin.
Therefore, we are better than them. Group thinking, baby. We are the greatest nation in the world. We are right and they are wrong. The world is black and white, and of course, because we won, God is on our side. And the ever funky becomes deep down skunky when you see the terms of surrender for the defeated. Remember, oh glorious people, they too want to be winners. That's right. When we hear songs celebrating our victory pouring from the mouths of the very people we defeated, we know that they have made peace with our supremacy. Oh, glorious people. Let me take you back to the schoolyard. Most kids just give in and follow the bully, but a few back away threatening some type of retaliation. Whether subservient or resistant, each will adjust their philosophy to accommodate defeat. That's the illusion of choice. The old binary hustle. Tutsi versus Hutu. God-fearing versus heathens. Democrats versus Republicans. Yes, there are two sides to every coin, but it's still the same coin. Losers have two choices. Entertain us by playing out our vision of them as meek, emasculated jesters, or excite us, playing out our vision of them as dangerous, captured savages. Well, it's natural to the defeated, all of that bowing and scraping. But it's also okay to let a little pressure out of the system and listen to the most aggressive ones roar and shout insults about what they think we've done to them, and so on. I love the anguished, fiery testimonials. I love them owning the bad names we called them. I just can't figure out why they think all of that noise and blaming inspires guilt or shame. It's actually therapeutic for me. Tell us again, what did we do to you?
There it is.
That was the piece, They Too Want to Be Winners. What do you think when you hear that now, Wynton, about that piece that you wrote?
I mean, I want to laugh. I laugh at Wendell. You know, we met when he was a freshman in high school. I was a junior. And we've known each other for a very long time. He actually did a narration on my brother Branford's first record in 1984. I guess when it was 21 or something like that at that time, 22 years old. And you know, the words, they speak for themselves.
Right.
You know.
Well, we'll get. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I mean, it's just Yes, that's the choice.
It-
We've seen it. It's as old as Hannibal.
yeah. Well, I'm going to quote throughout of Mr. Game, so we'll get a lot of the voice of Mr. Game, but I wanted to get Wendell in there. Is it harder for you to write words than music?
No, words. I mean, I'm not. It's easy in a way that I'm not really a writer. I do it for fun. So I do it. I write a lot. I enjoy writing. Music is more difficult to write than words because of the depth.
Right.
You're dealing with harmony. You're dealing with a lot of different mathematic dynamics that you're not dealing with words. But words have their own challenges. Because we talk and we use words all the time, they're easier to deal with than music.
Yeah, but Wynton, there's a lot of poetry in here. This isn't just libretto. I'm going to quote some of it, but it really is very finely done. I mean, just some very funny moments, some very interesting wordplay, some interesting rhythmic patterns, some really original stuff like financial twerking.
Right.
Financial twerking.
I mean,
I love that. So we'll get to some of that as well. Obviously, the music, you brought your band with you for the studio, the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. For those watching around the country, let me just say, if you've come to New York and you haven't come to Jazz at Lincoln Center, you've missed out on the best show in the city. It is truly a jewel of New York. If you're coming in New York on vacation, you want to see Broadway, do that, but do not miss Jazz at Lincoln Center. It is an all-star team, truly an all-star team of musicians. It's a relatively small group in the orchestra. But if you keep coming, you see them, they're all the same, they're very familiar. Wynton really is so generous in sharing the ball. So many of them do their own compositions that they're all playing alongside. You learn a lot at Jazz at Lincoln Center. It's not just the music. It's very interesting. The musicians end up talking to you, giving you sort of a history lesson of jazz. So you really walk out not just, with the music in your soul, but you learn something as well. And again, I've always admired that Wynton, frankly, LeBron James could learn something from you. You have completely share the ball. What was it like in the studio with your guys? You also had some women, of course, who did the vocals. There's so much improvisation to jazz. Here, we'll get to the composition itself, but how much of this was written in the studio, or how much of it did you just give it to your guys and just said, hey, play it like it's written?
No, it's almost all of this is written out because the pieces are not that long, but there are elements of improvisation inside of it. It has a very, very tight form. It's hard to hold these kind of long pieces together. But because just the qualities of the orchestra members I'm writing for them, and you were right, they are fantastic. We've been together for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're all composers and arrangers. We play each other's music.
I know.
We recorded the entire album in 9 hours. So.
And this was pre-COVID, Wynton?
Pre-COVID, yeah. We recorded it in 2019.
And in 9 hours, one session.
In 2019, in a session and a half, but also our young ladies that were singing, they're fantastic. Camille Thurman, one of our singers, was playing in the orchestra at that time. And she sang, Ashley Pizzotti, fantastic. Christy DeShield, great. They did such a fantastic job because many of us were in our 50s and 40s and they're in their 20s. And we were so proud of them because their parts are very difficult. They're voiced in fourths and augmented fourths. And, it was really an effort of everybody, our team, our union crew at the hall, Frederick P. Rose Hall. They built booths for us so we could set up in the studio and do everything live. Our engineer, Todd Whitelock, I've known him since we were in our 20s up at then before Sony at Columbia Records, then Sony. So, it was a great thing to do. I mean, it's just for all of us, it brought us all together.
So this is not a master class. Folks Conversation series is about ideas, and the record is filled with ideas. But we have a lot of jazz students, and I was wondering, this is just such a unusual recording. You once said to me recently, you said, there's really no even commercial terminology for the music itself, for the composition. There's no actual language that's ever been used to describe it. I would just say, as an amateur and someone who's written about music, there's such a layering of music, you can't tell what's on top of the other one. It's like an archive, an archaeological dig of interesting things. 1960s New Orleans music, 1970s funk. There's marching music, there's circus music, there's minstrel music. I hear so much of brill building. I'm probably the only one that heard stuff and thought, I was thinking of, let's call them this, and where has the love gone? I love those two tracks. I just adored them. And I'm thinking, God, that sounds like, Bacharach and, just so many interesting show tune style. There's the Gershwin-esque song, Mr. Goodman, Good Time Man, swing rhythm, Quincy Jones. I heard Steely Dan. It's just an endless, funky jazz. There's a Brazilian piece, right? Can you talk a little about the making of this? And am I dead wrong? Did I miss anything, or have I added too many layers to this? Because I just think it's almost so hard to follow. It is so extraordinarily inventive.
No, I think, for any musician in the arts, what are you going to do? You have a mythology that you're mining, and whatever is laid out in your the things the music you've learned and that you understood, it's in your music, and your thing is to weave it all into a tapestry of sound that is the most current understanding of what those forms and those sounds can be. So for this piece, I wrote only from my memory, things I played as a kid growing up. The Ever Fonky Lowdown is a circus. I never forget the first time I played a circus. I was maybe 15. I was young, and all the musicians were older. And they were like, hey, man, the kid is here. Let him play this one. Let him play this other one. So when we finished rehearsing, and I was playing like 13 or 14 pieces, I thought, boy, they really like the way that I play. And then when the circus started, I realized by the third or fourth tune, the trumpet never stops playing. So they were all laughing. They're looking at me saying, yeah, kid, play the next one. Man, my chops were so unbelievably gone. And I never attended the circus after that where I didn't look at the trumpet player and say, boy, I feel sorry for you. So I played in a funk band in the 1970s. And it's not like I'm going back copying and pasting stuff like a kind of producer or somebody who's not a musician. I'm putting the music together, not as snatches of music, because it's all one thing in my mind. So I'm not, the process is very different when you're writing a composition or you're thinking about elements of music and how they interact with each other. It can be described in a kind of way of a pastiche, but that's not what it is at all. It's to look into New Orleans funk and a John Philip Sousa march and the mechanics of an American popular song and a Johann Bach chorale and church triads and the way that they play those, and the music my father and the musicians played in the 1960s and 70s with the kind of melodic language they used in relation to Morisés Santos and Brazilian music, because they all are related in a certain way. The DNA, they're all tied up with one another. And through your natural hearing, understand how all of these things actually have the same intention. It's like a version of the universal humanism that's expressed in music. And also, let's never forget that music has memory. And music touches a stream of memory that goes way back before times that you know of. And if you add to that a room full of musicians who can all improvise and make up things, like our guitarist Doug Womble. Our guitarist Doug Womble doesn't really have a part. I gave him a line. He's old country boy from Memphis, and he does this thing. Drum parts are always sketchy because you want your drummer to just to be free to come up with things. My brother Jason is from New Orleans, so he plays all of these styles.
For those of you who are fans of Wynton, I know that many of you are. What he was just saying was just so extraordinary because, of course, I'm absolutely an amateur. And so I was really listening to this and was just amazed by not just its quality, it's just that, its ambition, the number of ways that it has draws upon ultimate disciplines. And I was going to get him to play a little, and we will. But in the meantime, let's play another song from Ever Fonky Lowdown. This is, I was going to discuss this in a little while, but let's do it now. This one speaks to the sort of commercializing aspects of the game that Mr. Game is. This song is called Consider This About the Filth We Love.
Consider this about the filth we love. Consider this from the view above. We love it, we like it, we sell it. Consider this about the filth we make. Consider this about the filth we take. We like it, we love it, we buy it. Consider this about the filth we love. Consider this from a view above. We like it, we love it, we buy it, we sell it, we believe it, we achieve it, we live it. We just got to have what we need, what we want now. We love it, 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 we love it.
Everything gets for sale.
Yeah.
Everything gets for sale.
Oh, yeah.
Everything gets for sale. Everything gets for sale. Everything gets for sale. Everything gets for sale. Everything gets for sale.
Consider this about the filth we love. Consider this about the filth we make. Consider this from a view above. Consider this about the filth we take. Oh, we won't see the reality. Oh, we won't see the reality.
Love that. Wynton, I love that sort of semi-bridge, the vocal of everything is for sale.
Right.
Everything is for sale. And we played that out of order because we lost you for a while. So we'll come back and talk about how that tune, that track really speaks to the sort of commodification that Mr. Game is talking about all of our lives, and how rigged it is, and how related it is to consumerism and capitalism, and the purchasing of things we don't even need or want. And in this case, the filth that we love, which I think is just a wonderful lyric. So we'll come back to the theme of that, but what do you think when you think of that track?
The first thing is, the first time I heard of a band from New Orleans called the Funky Meters, well, sometimes in the late 60s, early 70s, I was a kid, maybe 9 or 10, and they played at a club in New Orleans called the Ivanhoe. And it was, people would be spilling out on the streets hearing them, and they had a drummer named Zigaboo. And Zigaboo Modeste was unbelievably funky. So you take a funk beat like people going, but Zig would put the New Orleans twist in it. So that's what that's. So when you first saw the meters live, you were like, damn, what is this that they're playing? And then this, like a Tower of Power piece, like a Tower of Power piece, What is Hip, where they use the baritone and they have all these horn answers.
Yeah.
And if you remember the early 70s, Jesus Christ Superstar and that kind of music, you
Yeah.
know, there was always a kind of anthemic little things. So I kind of, you know, I wasn't thinking about these things. I just put them together just in the sound of that kind of music and that doodip, boodip, boodip, boodip. That's Earth, Wind, and Fire had a song called Africano Power Medley. Man, I must have played that song 1,000,000 times.
I
In the
remember
70s.
that song.
Man, we played funk concerts, 3 or 4 concerts a week I played from the time I was 13, just turned 13 to 16 when I left the band. And we played hundreds of gigs playing these type of phrases. So I think of that, and then the words, consider this about the filth we love. I just want to convey the joy that you pursue decadence with, and just unbridled. You can't tell anybody anything. You know, I think about all the different kind of situations I would be in growing up, where you know it was what it was. I'm from New Orleans, and just there's always a thought that you're talking about something terrible when you're talking about drug addicts, or when you're talking about all these things that go on out here. But when you're part of it and you see people, they pursue it with an unbelievable glee and feeling. They just don't like you calling it that. So you know, I'm just trying to miss the game. We're just trying to take the cover off of it. Okay, this is
Right.
what this is. Is this right to be having 11-year-olds doing this? Like, what do we think about that?
So let's, before we move on to something else, we talked about cue cards. I'm wondering if you can sort of share with us, you know, we're trying to, you know, get into the mind of Wynton Marsalis. This was very helpful to just hear you now about the various influences, you know, from the circus and Earth, Wind, and Fire stuff when you were a kid. And so we're getting a sense of the very textured layers of these tracks. So is there anything you can play or you can show us to give us a sense of how this composition gets composed?
Okay, the form of this piece is very complex. So this is the first time I ever used cue cards, but it's so many complex parts, I put them on these cue cards. So it's like all of these cards are packed with writing. I write really small. I don't know if you can see it, but it's color coded.
I'm just sorry, they're filled with writing about the music, or it's not the lyrics?
They're filled with writing about the lyrics and the music. Okay, the pink ones are about music that is when Mr. Game is selling you something. So it's called Define the Other. And I just wrote all over these cue cards. I'm gonna see if I can. I know you can't really see it, but I don't know if you can see it. It's like,
and you're saying, Wynton, in all the prior, I think you've had 5 recorded records, nothing like this process. You've never had this kind of a process before.
well, yeah, I've written maybe 30 extended pieces,
Right.
but I've had 5 records that are about social issues.
Yeah.
But even complex orchestra pieces like All Rise is an hour and a half of orchestra and choir. I didn't use cue cards. I've had other complex things, but this was so complex that I used those cards, and I had another set. So when I looked at the form, the first one, I didn't like I didn't like the form I had, so I redid it. And I will go by the color code and lay it out and see when elements came back. So the yellow meant the savior and the wild card. The blue meant the Ever Fonky Lowdown. The green meant, so on and so forth. But the melodic language I was using comes from music that my father and the musicians played. And the odd needed pieces also. There's a song they used to always play that I love called the Magnolia Triangle. It's in 5. And it's written by drummer James Black. It goes. On and on. I don't want to mess it up. I'm not but
I love
when I would hear them play in 5. so on and so forth. It's like this kind of music is real complicated. And you can
Yeah.
hear the melodic language he's using. I try to use that in the context of this piece. And it's also the first time I ever used that type of language.
What about the Brazilian pieces? There's definitely a Brazilian influence as well. It's not bossa nova, but did you tell me it was there is actually a Brazilian piano player, jazz piano player that is sort of in your mind is embodied within this music?
There's a guy named Moacir Santos, and he grew up as an orphan in Brazil. Pernambuco, he was born in that region. And he would go to different cities as a kid and attach himself to the community band. And that way he would be welcomed in the community and he would learn. He writes the most fantastic music. He's passed away now, but he's known as the Brazilian Duke Ellington.
Oh, wow.
I was listening to one of his records, a record called, I forget the exact name of the record, but I know the piece is called Lemurianos. And it's in 5 and it's in 6. So the 5, it goes doom doom ding 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 doom bing doom bing. So what he did was he put the clap on every 2 beats. So it's a doom boom bing doom bing doom doom boom ding boom bing boom doom boom boom. So it's an interesting way to break the 5 up. A lot of times in African music, it's a combination of an odd meter and an even meter sounding at the same time. It's like a male and female rhythm that you have to find balance and achieve balance. Sometimes you play on the odd side and sometimes you play on the even side. So in the Ever Funky in 5, I have the tuba going boom, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. So I will take elements of music that I hear from other cultures, something that I like, and see how does that apply to our music, or how could we use these? Right. And there are hundreds of these kind of examples.
Yeah, but there's also like the time signatures are all over the place. There's so many, they're just so complex. There's like something like the marching music, like I think is it 6/8 or something. I mean, it's just.
Well, that's 6/8 march. Right? That's like the Washington Post march. That's my favorite march.
Is that right?
Phillips march. Oh, that's a fantastic march.
Yeah, I love that. And again, that stuff jumps out at you in this record. Like, where did that just come from? And I have to tell you, before we release the audience, I want to make sure that they all get this record. You know, it's streaming on all of the services, on Apple Music and Amazon and Spotify, and you can buy it on jazz.org/funky. But everyone, you'll see what I'm talking about when you listen to this record. It just offers, it is so rich in its musical experimentation and originality. It's unlike anything, frankly, you'll ever hear. Let's talk a little about what I would say the politics of this record, because there is a very strong element of original thinking through the voice of a street urban prophet about the game that we're all in, and specifically as it relates to human rights and race. The record comes out in the Black Lives Matter moment, with police violence in everyone's mind, racial inequality, and of course, social upheaval. Can you talk about the statement in your mind? Because even if it's intended or not, it seems to me that it's making a very strong statement about race and about the American story of slavery.
Yeah, Mr. Game is actually not meant to be black. He's meant to be white. And the audience that he is speaking to is a white audience. And he's selling them on an idea of America in which they are dominant, and these others, whoever they happen to be, he doesn't call them black.
Exactly.
He
does talk about slaves, but he doesn't tell you what color they are.
That's right, because it applies to, and he says it's an international hustle, baby, and it's
no, you actually say it doesn't apply to any specific race. It applies to everyone across time. I love that lyric, across time, as if the world, this Mr. Game is talking about is the world.
It's always somebody, the foil, right? So you could be talking about Caesar and the Gauls. You could be talking about, you take your pick. I mean, it's so many, I can't
I
pointed
understand.
out. It exists all through the world right now. If you travel, you of course have encountered it. And Black Lives Matters dominates our central space. But you know, the question of right now is, what is that large group of white voters who are always abused and sold a bag of goods? They're always last. They're always treated. They're always the victim of every mass crime because they're the largest pool of money that you're trying to get in and steal and rip off. When are they going to wake up and say, man, we're tired of being treated like this? Like, we fought the Civil War. We didn't have slaves. We're out there fighting for all this prejudice and stuff. We're not benefiting from any of that. This tax plan came out. It didn't help us. This wasn't designed for us. And when there's going to be a time that they're going to wake up and realize that money, power, labor, these are the issues. Not you and some black dude that you're not ever going to see from the west side of Chicago who might be coming to Nebraska, or might be coming to Iowa, or might be coming to, he's not coming there. Like, he's not your problem. He's not your problem. Your problem is the people who are reaching into your bank account all the time, taking your funds and abusing you and making you fight for something that's not in your best, in your self-interest. So there's not a lot of a lot of times we're not used to a black person who has a Afro-American, the type of perspective I have, because there are many different types of black people, many different types of people speaking to white people in a certain way. I'm not complaining to white folks. I'm not saying, look at what y'all did to us. I'm saying, let's wake up and not be just nothing. We fell for this in the 1860s. We're going to fall for it again. Let's wake up and try to make our country be something that can be great. And let's actually be proud of ourselves. We don't have to be the greatest. Let's realize our potential and function in the world. We're in a world that's increasingly connected and trying to figure out how to be disconnected from our neighbors. Yes, we have problems. We have social problems. We have a blood-stained history. We have a past, as all these nations have them. Ours is no better or no worse. The only thing that makes ours worse is that it's set against the backdrop of a mythology of freedom. So, okay, but that's our mythology. It does not have to be your mythology. Your mythology could be what Genghis Khan's was. I'm sorry y'all came across me, but I got to have this. So, you know, we have an opportunity always to make ourselves better. We can't do it falling for the same games. It has nothing to do with the inner city, Black Lives Matter. Of course, it's a part of it because corruption in the police department and runaway violence in poor communities, of course, visited on Black Americans. Obviously, I did a whole record called "A Plantation to the Penitentiary."
Yeah,
and
I
that
love
violence
that
is
record.
not. Yeah, the violence is not just done on the street.
Yeah.
Most of the violence is done in courtrooms.
Yeah.
So, you know, yes, we protested on the street, which is great. We need to do that. But there's a, you know, we have the history we have, and we need to wake up to it and correct it. And these slogans and stuff we have to make sure this is not a wash cycle, because that's what if you've been around for a long time, it's hard for you not to feel like now the washing machine is going to go back on 12. We're going to reset it. So, you know, yeah. And this was written before all of this stuff has happened, but there's a reality.
So, but at the same time, and I love that you reminded us that Mr. Game is essentially white, speaking to white people, because he's oftentimes referring to what was done to this other people. Again, it doesn't tell you they were black. It's so clearly referenced that if you understand American history, you get a sense of what he's referring to about what we did to these other people and how that they too became part of this game. But at the same time, Wynton, there are two tracks that are based on the life and work of Fannie Lou Hamer and you know, the great civil rights activist. And so there are references to that. I'm just sort of curious, at some point, what's great about this is why you heard me say the word postmodern Porgy and Bess, because I think it's postmodern. It doesn't hit you directly. It comes at you from many different places with many different sounds and many different ideas. It's like a cacophony. If you're really listening to this record, it comes at you from, you know, you got to keep turning around. Like, where did that come from? So, but there was toward the end when the Fannie Lou Hamer pieces came up, that seemed to me deliberate. And I'm wondering if you have anything to say to that, about that.
Well, Fannie Lou is real life. Mr. Game could be anything.
Right.
And Mr. Game also, I said in this case, he's white, he's talking to white voters in America. But if it's in Korea, no, he's talking to whoever he's talking to. And Fannie Lou is a figure who was so powerful in the civil rights movement who's largely forgotten. So my mother loved Fannie Lou. So this was more a thing for me with my mama. She loved Fannie Lou. And I love telling Fannie Lou. I love having my man Doug Womble sing about her and play a white guy from the South that loved Southern culture of all kinds. And he sang it with so much feeling. And the music is based on kind of the feeling of this land is your land, this land is my land. You know, kind of get a little Guthrie out there and the feeling of how Anglo and Afro-American folk music actually are coming from the same root, the Anglo-Celtic root and the African pentatonic. And we talk about Fannie Lou, which she represented. And Mr. Game observes, you've done great in this game. You don't even know her name. Yeah. So, you know, by forgetting her very name, you're proving your worthiness to be a part of this, of what I'm doing. So,
but it's interesting though, because then, you know, Mr. Game, look, he's talking about an actual game that we're all in and we can't get out of it anyway. He's talking about a kind of endless pitting against people against each other. But that winning is the most important thing. I mean, it really is making a very strong statement about our consumer society, about capitalist society. There's some really great, you know, he's describing this game and he says, I love this line, he says, about getting paid, being played, and money gets made. So I just want people to know, you know, we've got a poet here behind on the other side of this Zoom production here tonight of Folks Conversation Series, because I just think there's lots of interesting Wynton Marsalis nuggets. Life is just a big transaction. Mr. Game is talking about the spoils of war, the winners and the losers, but also the fact that people get played, that they're suckers. That's why I just played that earlier track, you know, consider this about the filth we love, because it actually speaks to the, you know, the utter pointlessness of this. Can you talk about why the record speaks so directly to money itself? Because it comes up in so many ways. Selling and buying is in our DNA. There is nothing more important than money.
Just look at the life that we've.
What's behind all of that with Mr. Game?
And Mr. Game is just it's time immemorial. He's not even here. It's playing out this way. The acquisition of selling everything. I mean, we're selling pornography to kids. We've lost our minds out here. Everything cannot be transactional, right? You basically figure people function in a business sense, trade. We have a religion, whatever it is that we believe or don't believe. We have civics, which is education, art, things with the health, and we have politics. And that's how we negotiate our relationships with each other and what we do with a power dynamic. In our form of life now, everything is a business. The religion is a business. Civics are business. You know what kind of fight you have over who's going to serve food to kids and sell them junk for more money? Everything is a business. Arts, there's no art. It's just fake entertainment to sell to some pre-pubescent teenagers and exploit their little sexuality before they get it and get that trash in their system early so you can exploit them for the rest of their life. Politics, it's a money game. We don't even have to laugh. By the time you get to where you're voting, the money has already been split up. It's already the elite and the money that is going to be made. We just saw $1 trillion just float up to the top of our culture, just printed. And wonder, why is everybody broke but the stock market is doing good? I mean, it's crazy. Just the runaway greed that has gone on. We saw before the banks bankrupt the country and get more money. Nobody went to jail for that. Just everything we've seen in the last 15 years, damn, we're seeing something that we've never seen. Large scale, huge corruption just in full public view. You got to give people credit for just the audacity of it. Some of it you think, damn, I didn't know you could do that. You know what I mean? But you seeing it, like there's a line in Wagner where Wotan's Frika, his wife, is talking to him, and she's talking about a brother being with a sister. He said, who ever heard of a brother being with a sister? You know, she's asking Wotan, who ever heard of this? She's naming all the crazy stuff that's going on, and he goes, you've heard of it today. He just, you know, you've heard of it, you seeing it. And we just, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's just, we've lost our minds a certain way. You know, I mean, I don't understand it. I tell people all the time, I played so many funk gigs in the 70s. I saw so many people hugging their girlfriends and singing these songs that we sang. Okay, they're naive kind of love songs. If you had told me in 10 years, 13 years from this point, people will be using all kind of derogatory names, calling people that talking to women a certain way, and everybody was going to be cool with it. Man, nobody, you couldn't believe it. Or there's going to be a whole thing about black people killing each other, and everybody's entertained by that. Or they're entertained by somebody spending time in their life in jail. What's entertaining about that? Like it's not.
And all of that is a commodity, right? I mean, all of that.
It's all weird. It's like we're numb now. We're numb to stuff. We're numb.
Well, that was what you said before about the audacity, the shamelessness of it in plain view. No one even stops to, you know, wince or grimace because they expect. And we're
all a part of it. I'm a part of it. I'm not speaking from outside of American culture. I'm from this culture. I've done tons of dumb shit that I can look back on myself and say, damn. So it's not, I'm not, my perspective is never, let me tell y'all what's wrong with you. A lot of times I investigate. When I want to know really what's wrong, I look at what I've done that was absolutely stupid. So that way I can be sure that I'm accurate, at least in terms of what I've done.
What, in your mind, Mr. Game, is he merely a truth teller? Because I think you've just said a moment ago, look, he's just telling you what everyone should really already know. But I wonder also whether he has a more redemptive purpose, you know, sort of Wynton Marsalis providing a kind of a warning to humanity, a rallying cry. Because at one point you write in here about the costs of this game is that you lose your humanity just by playing. So you're stuck. On the one hand, Mr. Game says, we're all in this game anyway. You got to participate. It's all us against them. You know, it's all a race for money, a race for supremacy. And at the same time, you can't get out of it. You're probably suckered into it. There's been propaganda that holds you through it and gives you incentives to stay. But at the end, you lose your humanity. And I'm wondering whether for you, you know, given your history, you know, you've been around, you've lived. Is this a Wynton Marsalis warning shot?
I mean, I don't know that there's so much a warning shot. Mr. Game is given a blueprint. At the end, Mr. Game, this particular iteration of the game, he said he's done this game many times across time and space. It's been played. But this time, for some reason, he's disappointed. So he changes his character in the very last minute. And he says, this game was not about them. Like normally he doesn't tell you who the game was about. He plays the game and he uses you and he keeps going on. So he identifies all the hustles and all the things designed to analyze, paralyze, bind, and blind you. And then he says, oh, can't you see? I use kind of a little phrase from the national anthem. Don't look around. Yeah. I'm always saying, just look around. You're going to see it. Look under these sheets. Don't just accept what you see coming at you. You know, the corrupt laws, the endless litigation over trivia, ridiculous rules, bureaucratic incompetence, pay to live, pay to die, pay to be married, pay to die, pay. Indifferent government spending and wasting all of your money that you don't have any control over and don't want to have control over. He's going through the list of things that we all have experienced and felt, endorsing tribal policies that violate your sense of self and your understanding of how the world could work symbiotically to swallow the fake narrative of Democrat and Republican, right and left, black and white. It's like how the word Marxist is thrown around. I always like to ask people questions now. I say, can you tell me what a Marxist is? My friend of mine, Phil Shap, this joke, he said, there are probably fewer Marxists in America than there are jazz fans. So it's just, so, and he breaks down how we have a never ending them versus us. And in one moment, Mr. Game says, who is us? We are you when you get the chance to be. So everybody's waiting to get the chance to be us. And he breaks down to people that you have to sacrifice for this stuff. This costs you. It's not free. There's no easy way through this. And at the end.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and it infects all institutions within society. It's not just a statement about, capitalism. It really, what you're saying, it's corrupting of all institutions. I think you have at one point, Wynton, you said the commodification of the communities. I love that, Wynton. That's saying, even the communities themselves have become commodified, internally, externally.
Look at people selling all your stuff. You sign up on something online and you get sold to something as in a block of people so they can advertise to you.
Yeah.
Well,
you have some interesting things about that, by the way. I thought you picked up on something here. I wonder whether Apple and Amazon will be interested in this. You talk a little about data collection and your phone, like don't forget your phone. And you point out, you say, well, look, with the use of, the phone, we know your buying preferences. We know everything we need to know about you. We know how to sell you simply because you're just out in the world using your phone.
But and I also connected it to slavery because you always hear Martin Luther King would always say, well, somebody does this to you, they're doing it to them. But I would always think, man, I don't see how you getting lynched does that to the person who's lynching you. Like, I don't actually. Then when I started to think about Mr. Game and I started to think about our history, what did slavery do to us? The fact that you were a slave, you had to have those papers with you all the time. And if you didn't have the paper, you weren't free. And sometimes you had the paper, you still weren't free. So if you look at that, and then he's saying, accounting for people is just in our DNA. We know how to account for a person's economic value. So he goes through the things that slavery taught the nation. And he shows us how the passage of time has made us look at the world a certain way because of our relationship to the peculiar institution and our desire to hold on to that institution, even to today, really, if you consider peonage to be a part of slavery, because now the battle more is of peonage and getting people to not work for nothing. If you see how prison labor is and how prisoners are treated and just how the system is based around labor and poverty and the reinforcement of poverty, and the intellectual energy is not expended trying to figure out a lower class economic infrastructure and how to find balance in our system. And all of these things are achievable if there is intellectual energy expended on that, instead of all of it being expended on how can I abuse people who have less education and less money and come up with systems that will leave them even more broke than they are so I can buy more stuff.
But what you're saying, though, there's sort of like the pathology that comes just out of slavery begins in its essence with sort of economic value. You're owning something. That's right. It's morally vulgar, the idea that you would own another human being. And it's worse than that. Not only do you own him or her, but you put him to work for free labor. So the entire enterprise, of the Civil War, the entire Southern war, the way of the South, was an exploitation that is at its core about ownership and economics and buying and selling, even from the very essence. And I think what you just said a moment ago, which I think is a very wise perception, is that, what do you expect of a country that comes out of something like that? They never lose the impulse to buy and sell. They never lose the idea that I own something, and owning something is really important in the United States.
That's on the one hand. And then there are many other aspects to slavery because of all of what you had to do to lie to yourself, to make what you would do. Because the problem with slavery in America was that it was so diametrically opposed to the cradle of the nation. Yeah. It produced a problem because slavery is not only endemic to the United States, there's still slavery in the world. And because the Ever Fonky reaches across time, people have been enslaving people since. Part of what brought Rome down was the numbers of the vast numbers of slaves they had and the dishonesty of their dealings with the Italians that surrounded them. The slavery created a certain type of dishonesty, a moral deprivation in the center of your public life, because what was going to happen to a man slave was different from what was going to happen to a woman slave.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're building an empire, you always have the three components: absolute slaughter, people are going to get killed if they don't do what they're told to do; concubinage, somebody's from standpoint of a woman, your sexuality now belongs to me, and I'm going to do what I want to do with it the way I see fit. And then you're gonna work. You're here and you're gonna work until I tell you to work.
It's interesting, when we were talking a moment ago about data collection, it's interesting these truths that you put in Mr. Game's mouth. You know, like at one point you say buying and selling is cathartic, which is sort of an interesting way of saying when people say, yeah, I'm addicted to go on Amazon every night. They'll tell you, you know, every night I want to buy something and so I get it delivered. You know, that there's something cathartic about it. And then you talked about the data collection and you say, you cannot have enough surveillance and security. You talked about borders. It's so interesting when you think about the immigration debate. You know, I don't even know, like when you wrote all this, Wynton, it was so foreshadowing of issues that are very, very relevant to 2020. So it seems to me you were really onto something, because you really are. If you remember, there's several notations about borders and then in the context of borders about, you know, being able to cross and, you know, don't forget you have to have your papers. And then this idea of you cannot have enough surveillance and security. There's almost an ironic inkling there from Mr. Game. I mean, when you think about how things have been playing out in the Supreme Court, how things have been playing out, I wonder whether you thought about Mr. Game and his response to this.
Yeah, Mr. Game is everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't make a difference whether you're on the left or the right. Like, our problems are not going to be solved the way we're looking at them.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, okay, you got the right, they're getting you. The left was in with you, you know, okay, they're getting you too. That's not
right.
You know,
What,
so yeah, I look at everything that happens. Yeah, I want to just say a word about the justice. You know.
Yeah, please do.
She brought us to play in the chambers. They would have cultural things. Our group came and played.
Wait, you're talking about Justice Ginsburg.
Yes, yes. She had a program where she would bring different artists, and one of them, our group came and played. It was a small band, and she's just so soulful, and with so much feeling. We talked about the music and we played it, and she said that they believe that culture is an important part of the judgment, of strengthening your judgment and your understanding of the breadth and depth of the world. And she has such a lyric understanding and has such a lyrical presence that I've been thinking a lot about. This maybe 4 years ago that we played in the court. There's actually a room that we came in and played in. And
I'm just curious, what did you play? Did you think, well, here we are with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, we're at the Supreme Court, we have something very specific to share with them? Like what was the playlist?
We played stuff like a piece that I wrote called Free to Be. It was a small group. I don't remember the exact set list. I'm sure we played some blues. I mean, some things I'm sure that we played. Uh-huh. We played Sweet Georgia Brown. We played a piece that I wrote called The Magic Hour. We played a Gordon Jenkins song called Goodbye. We played a Buddy Bolden song, Lord, Lord, Lord. So we played stuff from throughout the music. We played something with the Afro-Latin groove called Limbo Jazz. So we played something to give them a good sense of just a range and breadth of the music. And we talked about different objectives. And I remember the room, it was a really good sounding room. It wasn't that big, but the room had a very good quality to sound.
Uh-huh. Did she or any of the other justices have anything interesting to say in response?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact conversations we had, but Man, it was all very different. I mean, they're very collegial, right? It's not
Yeah,
how
of
you would
course.
necessarily think.
Right.
And
Well,
Justice Roberts was a trumpet player, so
oh, is that right?
this was before him. Yeah, but I played another time one of Louis Armstrong's trumpets for the Smithsonian, and the Chief Justice introduced the event, and he is a trumpet player. So
That's great.
this kind of stuff, you see these patterns all over. But I want to say about the quartet, they were very collegial with each other.
Yeah. But it also shows you, again, the power of art, the power of music, the way that it reaches across time. It is able to, in what you just described, somehow unite Justice Ginsburg and Justice Roberts in ways that they didn't often unite when they decided opinions, but they were able to feel united surrounded by Wynton Marsalis and some of his music. I just think that is, it gives us hope that what Jazz at Lincoln Center is about. I mean, this other piece, I know you and I've talked about this before. Maybe you can, since we have so many music students probably watching, you've talked about, music theory, the complexity of studying music, and yet how absent that is in contemporary culture. In many ways, you are, a preservationist. Not only are you giving us new music, but, I've been coming for years, and you've been preserving an entire culture of American of song and American sound, a uniquely American song and sound. And that is a righteous role, my friend, to be able, it's a heavy burden on you and the boys to be able to play this role. And I wonder whether, you give me this anecdote about the Supreme Court, and I think, well, maybe that gives me faith that we still can hold on to our culture. I mean, what is it that you think of when you think about, that contemporary music today? It's all sampled. It's all done with machines. You don't really have to know notational music at all, frankly. I wonder if you can speak to that.
People are creative with whatever they do. So I'm going to start with that. There's going to be creative people in any form, and they're going to come up with things no one came up with. But I think that the conservation and preservation works hand in hand with innovation. They're not enemies. They're not opposites. Interesting thing that Justice Ginsburg said, she was talking about a dissenting opinion. So we were talking about, she said that, a dissenting opinion is very important. If you get to write the dissenting opinion, she said, because a dissenting opinion many times shapes history. So maybe at that time, there's not an understanding, or if you can have enough insight in that dissent, it actually works with assent. So in that way, I think it's not no more about people who know music or they don't know music, because non-music knowers actually will come up with something a musician will never come up with. But to abandon music and the study and knowledge of music because you have new tools and things you can do to create other forms that are provocative, that have also creativity to them, it's imbecilic. Like human civilization is an additive process, just as it would be imbecilic to deny the creativity of whatever new forms and things that people come up with, only to say only this is good. All of these things work in a big cycle. So at certain points, you're responsible for, on the cycle, saying, we need to rein some of this in and understand what our Constitution is and be fundamental. At other times, you have to say, we're too fundamental. We need to loosen this up. So we're living in cycles inside of cycles inside of cycles. We're not living in a straight line. It feels like that. But if a person gets lost in the field, you know what they do? They walk around in a circle because the earth is spinning. They think they're going straight, but they go around in a circle.
I can't resist this, Wynton, because you gave us this really wonderful winning Supreme Court anecdote from Justice Ginsburg. But I wonder whether music, especially the music that you've been composing, I'm talking about the 5 big compositions, and some of which that have such strong social issues and social activism overtones and undertones. I wonder whether these kinds of compositions, like the Ever Fonky Lowdown, they're dissenting opinions. I wonder whether that they play the same role in a way, you know. It may not have the same immediacy of, you know, some hip hop song, you know, that's playing repeatedly or being downloaded repeatedly, but it stays with you and it moves you and shakes you and makes you think about the history that you've lived through. I mean, as you were telling that story, I said, so much of the music that you've created in these compositions, certainly, you know, Blood on the Fields, you know, it's a dissenting opinion. It has the same power and reach.
You know, I don't know. I feel like the statements we are making, they don't have a relationship against hip hop or against rock or against any of the forms of music that fall under rock and roll, which is like something for kids that got corrupted to exploit their sexuality and then became gargoylish that deals with racial and all these other issues in an immediate entertainment like wrestling, you know, where they would get up and start cussing at each other and talk about their mamas. It was like a game at first in the 70s. I'm gonna kill your mother. I saw her in the parking lot. You know, it's like, at first it was a joke. Then it got to a thing where you were like, well, wait a second, these people are serious about this, you know. So I'm not gonna, I mean, we're not really, but I don't see how what Mr. Game can be a dissenting opinion in a democracy. It's like why I never called myself a minority. I can't be a minority in my country. Like, is a French person a minority in France? So it's like, sometimes you accept these kind of narratives. So I feel like if you look at the Ever Fonky Lowdown, what I'm saying at the end of it, the music, I start with a march, just like John Philip Sousa march. I'm not dissenting. Funk and the grooves and all the different types of music. It's integrated music. It's actually what my life in New Orleans was. And it was a very segregated place, but the music was integrated. The musicians I knew were integrated. My father believed in that. The people I knew all kinds of people. And now traveling around the world, I've met all kinds of people. And I try to put their experiences also in my music. And I don't feel like because it's not a commercial product, it's not calling somebody a name or not some type of social thing trying to tell some group of people they're okay with some kind of sophomoric, whiny, I lost my love opinion to appeal to a demographic because somebody somewhere said this is what these kind of people like, and you got to get this person to come in and represent the hood or the suburbs of this. My experience, that's not who people are. So in actuality, the majority opinion is the dissenting opinion because most people, I don't think we live that way. And I think the average person is victimized by these kind of mass statements, whether it's somebody in the hood or somebody in the suburbs or somebody in this or somebody in that. They're just misinformed and uneducated. And, you know, when somebody tries to educate people and they try to do things, they become lightning rods. And it encourages you to be quiet. Like we talked about LeBron James earlier. And it's one thing that I respect about him if you think about where he came from.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the hood, because it's not a matter of the hood. That's really a cliched way of looking at stuff. People live in neighborhoods and they have families wherever they are. But for him to be a guy with no father and his mama had a lot of social challenges, now he has a challenge. It's not because he's from the hood. When both of your parents, when your parents are compromised, now let's look at what this guy then. You add to it, he's a great genius athlete who gets the glare of this kind of media machine on him as a kid. Man, you almost never survive that. It's such a difficult thing. And I've watched him and just the decisions he made, you know, as a younger person, because I mean, I'm at a certain age, he's much younger than me. And the maturity that he handles now is everything he does, he comes from a certain environment. He has elements of that in him, but he handles that. And he's handled himself as a man, as a human being, and using his insight and his vision, his creativity. And he's not a statistic. He's not a guy standing around babbling, speaking in a language he does not want to speak in. Yes, he's young. He, of course, could use further education, as we all could. But I have to look at him with pride. And he's actually a guy who's a great passer of the basketball, too. When he talks in his interviews, sometimes he says, me and my supporting cast and all of this stuff. Yeah. But so I look at him and I think, okay, you know, this guy was in that kind of loose position, and he did a lot with it, with his school. And I look at other things. Some of it is moving to see, and all the things he goes through, and how he just continues to, you know, he works with it.
So before we say goodnight to Wynton, don't leave yet, everyone, because we're going to play out with one of my favorite tracks on the record. And it has, I would say, very large political significance given our upcoming election. So we have some closing announcements, but first let me just tell you that you should listen to this record. I think you can tell from this last hour, it is loaded. It is loaded with incredible music, richness, originality, and brimming with ideas. Ideas coming at you from every direction. You want to be better, you want to be smarter, listen to this record. It can be streamed on Apple Music and Amazon and Spotify. You go to jazz.org/funky and you can buy it. So I hope you all will. Let me just give you some quick announcements about some of our upcoming events. Just a couple there. We've got, I think on just 2 nights from now, we've got, I can't really read it from here. Sorry. What is
A Call to Spy.
A Call to Spy. There it is, of course. It's a brand new film. It's an advanced screening. Some of you have already screened it. As you know from today, this is all about ideas. Folks' conversation series is about ideas. So even if you didn't get a chance to see the advanced screening, you'll learn a lot from this. The entire creative team will be with us. I think we've got some other events, but here's one other. On October 15th, we've got Barry Weiss, formerly an opinion writer for the New York Times. She's an author, and there's lots to talk about with an upcoming election with Barry. As you know, Folks has been on call all summer during the COVID, from spring and summer. We haven't charged at all. We've been doing it. We're a nonprofit. Now would be a good time to donate if you can. We've got a phone number you can donate. You can go to folks.org to donate. We'd appreciate it. You know that we were here, we were open for business. We tripled the amount of programming, provided something here with Wynton Marsalis. What we've done, what we do consistently is we focus on the aesthetics and cultural significance of art, and we enlarge the ideas in its range. And I hope that, you know, that we're making something of a contribution. When I frankly hear Wynton, I think, God, you know, this guy is just so loaded with everything. And I just, you know, Wynton, before I say goodnight, I just want to say, before we play this last song, that you are a true national treasure, really. You make us all better and more soulful, and always leave us more entertained. And you're a good friend. So thank you. Very grateful to you, my friend. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Thane. Thank you for having me, and for everybody who's looking. Thank you so much.
All right, so let's just play this out. This is there it is. This is the song I don't like, Nobody But Myself. It actually speaks to the polarization that we right now have with an election. Let's play this out and then say goodnight.
White people